Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Between Monsters and Men. Today we will be unfolding the mystery of Dr. Benton. At a young age, Thomas Benton, with the help of his little town, gathered enough money to go to college in Heidelberg, Germany to practice medicine. He was a promising, brilliant, and a passionate man when he had left. While at college, he met an estranged professor named Stockmar. Stockmar was known around the college for his odd obsession and research into the eternal youth, but that didn't stop Thomas from seeing him almost every day where the two talked about such oddities. Stockmar had passed away during the last few years Thomas had left of college, leaving behind a strange box for Thomas that he kept but never opened. After graduating, Thomas returned to New Hampshire where he became the health benefactor of the small town which now bears his name, Benton. He was a good doctor, helping many who were sick and injured, and he became so beloved that it shocked the town when in 1816 he suddenly disappeared from his career and went off into the woods. There, in a deserted shack, living as a hermit, he set up a laboratory where he could do research, but some came to believe that research was in eternal youth, much like his former professor. At first, it was a series of animal deaths that occurred around the town and farms nearby. Dead cows, horses, and sheep began to be found amongst the hills, barns, and stalls, and they all shared a particular trait, a fresh wound behind the left ear. The wound was red and swelling with a tiny white pinprick in the center. Not long after the animals were found dead, a corpse had gone missing from the back of an undertaker's wagon. The body was later found discarded in some bushes of a warren with another corpse next to it. Much like the animals, each body had the same wound behind the left ear. Confused by these sudden events and unusual markings, a small group of people traveled to Dr. Benton's shack to ask about such oddities. But the shack was abandoned. They searched for him, through the woods, in the village, about everywhere they could reach, but he had all but vanished. Months later, people began to see him in the wooded parts of Mount Mosellock. He was always seen wearing a black cape, would be fast, and had long white hair. November 1825. A Benton woman heard her daughter scream. Looking up, she came to see a black-caped figure carrying her little girl into the woods. The husband and a few neighbors gathered and followed the footprints to the little tunnel riven, from which there would be no escape. Yet the footprints abruptly ended. From above they heard laughter. Looking up to find Dr. Benton somehow ascended the stark cliff with the girl in his arms. Her father begged for her return, and the doctor did so, by hurling her off the cliff. No one could catch her, and she died. 1860. 2 loggers vanished from the mountainside. Only one was found bearing the same wound as the animals and corpses. 1901. Brakeman Mr. Tomaso was found dead beside a logging railroad track. The only mark on him was the infamous wound. 1970. A Dartmouth hiker went missing on Debunking Raven. Searchers went looking for him and found him in shock, aimlessly wandering. They took him to the Raven camp where he was then moved to a hospital in hangover. He had cuts, bruises, and a fractured skull. He had told one of his friends that he was climbing a ledge when a hand shot out through an opening in the rocks and shoved him. 2002. A hiker finds an old-style footprint in the mud of an unused trail. As mentioned in the legend, the town was named after Thomas Benton's family. This is true. The town was originally named Coventry, but the Governor Isaac Hill changed the town name to Benton on December 4, 1840, 21 years after Dr. Benton flipped a switch. The town was named after Thomas Hart Benton, who was a Missouri senator. Thomas Hart Benton was born August 10, 1821, and none of his family members before or after during the time period of the legend ever went to Germany, and none were doctors. So, this legend is unlikely, and probably the creative word to mouth by Dartmouth College students who rent and own some of the cabins near the mountain, most likely to give a scare to the new college students each year. What little information I could find on this legend is very vague, with maybe 2 or 3 sites actually having decent information, but most of it revolves around the telling of a scary story. The only other source of information I could find was from the book Weird New England, and even that was very vague. I could not find any pictures or any more sightings on Dr. Benton other than the sightings and attacks that I have listed, which I got from the book and from the sites. The research I did do to debunk the story was far easier than actually looking up Dr. Benton, if that is telling you anything. However, if you're very interested in learning more about him, my best advice is simply watching the television show called Supernatural, Season 3, Episode 15. Now tell me, do you believe in the legend of Dr. Benton?
You think I'm some kind of monster, don't you? Well, I gotta tell you, I have never done one thing that I did not have to do. This whole eternal life thing is very high maintenance.